can imagine being in a rubber suit and sitting in a phone booth for 12 hours with nobody else around you, and you're, at 70,000 feet, which is twice what an airliner flies. It can be a lonely place up there when you're by yourself, so that's definitely not for everybody.
I'm Heather Grish, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrish.com or on Instagram at heathergrish. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. Today, I'm here with Gary Costello, who is an airline pilot with approximately 7,000 hours flying both military and civilian aircraft. Gary started flying when he was 19 years old, where he earned his private pilot's license in 1998. In 2000, Gary went to the U.S. Navy Officers Candidate School, where he was commissioned as an officer in February 2001. From there, he went to pilot training and earned his Naval Aviator wings in April of 2002. He was selected to fly the P-3 Orion in Brunswick, Maine. From 2003 to 2006, he completed 2 6-month deployments as a P-3 pilot and mission commander. After his P-3, he relocated to Pensacola, Florida, where he instructed new Navy Marine Corps and Coast Guard aviators during their primary phase of flight training in the T-34. And after his 3-year tour, Gary received a unique opportunity to fly the U-2 Dragon Lady and the T-38 Talon for the U.S. Air Force at Beale Air Force Base in California. After several deployments and 1,000 hours in the U-2, Gary left active duty and relocated back to the East Coast to fly C-130s for the Rhode Island Air National Guard. And he's recently retired from the military and now flies the Airbus A320 for a legacy airline, which most of us are more familiar with. I don't know about you listeners, but I've never been on any of these other planes that Gary's been on and flown. And I'm super excited to learn about what it's like to have as an experience on your body and your mind being up in these planes. Thank you so much for being with us today, Gary.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Cool. This is going to be really fun. It's like all these planes that you've been on, that you've flown, that there's got to be some really interesting impacts that you've observed in the body and the mind. And I would imagine, I can't wait to hear about all the special training that you've had to go through to overcome perhaps some of the impacts that you're dealing with altitude changes and going at different speeds and being in different time zones all the time. And I'm sure you've learned quite a few interesting things. And those of us sort of novice flyers that maybe just go on our Airbus A320 with a pilot like you have probably never experienced some of the things that you felt in your body, especially with, I don't know a lot about the U-2, but what little I do know is that it sounds like if it's not the highest, it's one of the highest planes that goes the highest, that, beyond being an astronaut, that if you want to go higher, you have to be an astronaut. So I would imagine there's a fair amount that you had to go through for that. And in Ayurvedic medicine, and we spend so much time talking to people about the effects of change on their bodies. And, we actually have these travel protocols that we give people who are flying, because flying's really like, no joke on a person's body. And though you're probably a pro at it, we actually say in Ayurveda that the reason a person ages is because they've had more wind blow through them as the earth rotates on its axis. And it's this wind that blows through us from the movement of that rotation that is what makes us age, this wind blowing through us, almost like eroding us in some way. But you do it every day. And not only have you done it, you've been higher than most people because you're trained to fly these very special planes that not many pilots have actually flown before. So could you tell us a little bit about, why did you want to become a pilot in the first place?
Well, that's a great, I started flying, like you said, great intro, by the way. Yeah, when I was 19, I just always had a thing for airplanes. I thought it was really cool just to be able to leave the bounds of Earth or whatever and go check it out. So yeah, when I was 19, I took a lesson and decided that that's what I wanted to do. So I went ahead and got my ratings, and as you said, went to the military from there, and did that for a couple of decades. And like you said, spot on. There's definitely things the body does go through, in training, especially in the military environment, like Gforces, stuff like that, being upside down, aerobatic flying, which, a lot of people have an issue with that first, with getting airsick and stuff like that. So it's definitely a unique experience, and not really many other ways to get it other than being in an airplane like that.
I'd love to go back. I don't know about you. I didn't fly a lot, at 19. So I guess in high school, I think I'd only flown like maybe 2 times in high school. So it wasn't something I did a lot growing up. I was just kind of curious. Was there something about your first experience of flying that kind of even just as a passenger, that sort of got you interested in it?
Yeah, I think, like you, I didn't fly a lot as a kid either. I think we went to Florida a couple times there, like we all do from New England. And yeah, I just remember, being in the back and feeling, the engine spool up and rolling down the runway, getting pushed back in the seat a little bit, and then actually taking off and being able to look down and how everything looked so small. I mean, that was just, even as a little kid, that kind of fascinated me. And, I think it kind of started there. It was like, wow, this would be really cool to be able to do someday. But I think that's what got me. And then when I first started getting my private pilot's license, I think the first time I was able to fly, a little Cessna 152, which is just a small, single engine propeller airplane. First time I got to fly by myself, which is part of the normal training routine to get a private pilot's license. I thought that was pretty cool. Like, wow, I just, took this hunk of metal up in the air and came back and put it down on the ground, and we're all still in one piece. So that was definitely kind of the start of it that really excited me about being able to maybe get paid to do that someday.
Was there a little element of, I don't know, did it feel a little bit like thrill seeking for you in the beginning?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think so. I've always been a little bit of a thrill seeker. I liked going fast on dirt bikes as a kid and riding my bike and making jumps and stuff. Yeah, I think there was definitely that element there to that. Yeah, for sure. I think it definitely had some thrill seeking elements to it, what really got me interested in it. And especially, to look at military flying, even if you don't know a lot about military flying itself, it's like, wow, there's those cool, either really fast jets or big jets, and, they fly low, they fly fast, they fly high. So yeah, there's definitely, I think everybody who I've met throughout my career had a little bit of that desire to have some thrill seeking as far as flying goes.
So you've flown this plane, which is a U-2, and it's also known as the Dragon Lady. And could you take us through what, I guess, a typical U-2 mission is? Because it's a very special plane. I don't know that people could really understand what that experience would be like.
I had heard about the U-2 from a friend. The U-2 is a single seat airplane, one pilot. However, they have a couple of trainers. And what makes it unique is, one, the mission. They're long missions. You're by yourself. You're wearing a full pressure suit, which is, just like the space suit you'd see an astronauts wear. And it's a really tricky airplane to land because it's got a bicycle type landing gear, meaning there's one landing gear in the front and there's one really small in the back. And it's got a 100-foot wingspan. So if you can imagine, coming in on a bicycle with, huge wings behind you and landing like that, it's just a really kind of tricky airplane to land. Once you're qualified in the U-2, you're checked out and you go do your first deployment, which is of several locations overseas. I can't necessarily discuss, exactly where we go, but, if you've watched the news in the past 2 decades, you can probably guess.
What I'm hearing is that, first of all, these U-2s, they're a very specialized design of the plane, and that, well, first of all, you're wearing a spacesuit, essentially. That can't be like
right.
very comfortable, as opposed to like, flying for said airline and you can just, wear your nice pilot outfit and eat your lunch or whatever. I don't know. Like, it's easier, right, to do that.
That's actually a very good point. Like, you talk about, the spacesuit, like things that, you take for granted doing, like writing something down, using the bathroom, stuff like that. Wearing a full pressure suit makes everything. And pushing buttons, it's like trying to push buttons with boxing gloves on. It's something you definitely need to accommodate and get used to. The other thing that really, and this is part of the interview too, they put you in the pressure suit because a lot of people are claustrophobic and may not know it. So what they'll do is they'll dress you up in the suit and they'll put you in a corner and they put the helmet on. And I got to tell you, when I put that helmet on at first, I've never really had any issues with being claustrophobic. It's a little freaky. It's like putting your head in a fishbowl and, you can feel the oxygen around you. It's a little uneasy for sure. I know my heart started pounding a little bit, but, like anything else, you either get used to it or you don't. Fortunately I did, but definitely a unique experience just wearing that. Everybody gets their two full pressure suits, custom fit to them. And it's like anything else. You get used to it. It's definitely not for everybody, because you're by yourself, long missions. And if you can imagine, being in a rubber suit and sitting in a phone booth for 12 hours with nobody else around you, and you're, at 70,000 feet, which is twice what an airliner flies. It can be a lonely place up there when you're by yourself. So that's definitely not for everybody. It was great for me because I'm not an introvert, but I certainly don't have any issues with being by myself. So that definitely goes into it. As far as, what we, refer to as the monkey skills, that the hand flying, there's really nothing that somebody couldn't really learn. I don't know. It's a different airplane. Just because I flew that doesn't mean that, I'm better than anybody else or whatever. It was just something that stuck for me.
Wow, that's super interesting. And you've alluded to, some of the challenges of being, I'm sure not just like in that aircraft, but in other aircraft that, you have a mission and, even when you're flying commercial airline, you have a mission and responsibilities that you're trying to carry out. And meanwhile, you're doing this in some pretty high stakes circumstances and you're traveling across time zones and you're going to different places and you're got to make sure you get enough good sleep and don't get sick and take care of your body, right? So that you could be in tip top shape to do everything. What are some of the things that you have, I guess, some of the challenges, if there's any that I've left out? And then what are some of the, I guess, ways that you prepare to be your best when you're flying?
All right, great question again. Yeah, I'll go back to, again, the U2, then I'll kind of transition more into the lead side. So to fly the U2, we had a unique flight preparation. So if you think about it, you're in an airplane, you're by yourself, you're in a rubber suit, right? So what can happen to people when they're, 12 hours, you really can't go to the bathroom, right? You can pee, but, so you got to think about what you're eating, stuff like that, because you don't want to have a physiological incident, in the middle of a mission when you're 70,000 feet and, 1,000 miles or more from, where you need to be. So that's part of it. The other thing with the altitude, we used to do what was called a exercise enhanced pre-breathe. So we'd be breathing 100% oxygen for an hour before we took off, and we'd get on like an elliptical. And the idea of that was to get all the oxygen in your bloodstream, get the nitrogen flushed out, because part of the danger of flying at those high altitudes is the cabin altitude was pretty high. So it could, just like divers, suscept you to decompression sickness, which is, the bends, which you've probably heard if you're familiar with diving or anything like that. But basically, nitrogen bubbles expanding and going through the bloodstream. That can be really dangerous if you're, flying an airplane or diving for that matter. So we'd mitigate that through that exercised enhanced pre-breathe. And we'd also breathe 100% oxygen for the entire duration of the mission. That was one way we would prepare for that. Also being, like I said, kind of stuck in a phone booth for 9, 10, 12 plus hours, sitting down. You can't get up in that airplane and stretch your legs, go get a cup of coffee. You're sitting down. So really the only thing you can do is just get your exercise so you're able to sit that long, having somewhat of a strong core and, being somewhat limber, because I don't know if I could do it now, that I'm a little older. I think it's more of a young man and woman's game now, but that's it. Just taking care of your body, good sleep, because the missions can be very long and very fatiguing. So, trying to balance all that. That was from a mission side of it. Now, on the civilian side, the airline side, it's really a lot of the same. Like, yeah, it's, the airplanes are a lot more comfortable, a lot more spacious, and I can get up and get a cup of coffee and stretch my legs. So it's not bad. But the strange hours, we've all been on those flights where it's it takes off at 6 a.m., which sometimes for folks, that means getting up at 2 a.m. and driving to work and getting the airplane ready and stuff like that. So, and doing it in different time zones too. So trying to adjust your body to a good sleep schedule or sleeping when you can, so you are well rested. Because you said it's it's a huge responsibility. Airline travel is extremely safe and reliable, and it has been for years and years and years. But it's still a huge responsibility, so you want to make sure you're in good shape for that.
Okay, so you brought up something that was kind of funny. I was essentially like, even just having to go to the bathroom when you're up in some of these planes is a big challenge. And I was like, my brain was already going like, well, wouldn't you want to do like an enema to sort of like clear out to make sure that you don't have any chance of that happening? Was that something that any of the people had to ever do?
Not that I know of, not that they would admit anyway. No, a lot of the times the prescription was just like a high protein, low residue diet. Everybody knows their bodies, without being too gross or whatever. But, you know what you can eat. You usually know how it's going to react. And, that's silly and gross or whatever, I mean, it's a huge part of health is just, kind of being able to regulate that stuff. Like for me, I could eat pretty much anything and I knew how I was going to react. But, there are those times and there were definitely those times where people weren't so fortunate. I mean, sometimes nature has different plans for you and, people come back a little embarrassed, but, it's part of the job. Fortunately, it never happened to me, but it definitely happens. And that's just part of the job, I guess. It's part of the risk you take. But that is true. If you're going to be airborne for that long, you can pee. You're hooked up to something to be able to pee. That's fine. And you need to drink a lot of water too, because that'll help mitigate some of that decompression sickness risk too if you're well hydrated. Like hydration is so important with everything else.
Yeah, one of the things I've always heard about becoming a pilot, which I don't know if it's true, is that there's a certain eyesight requirement, which you'll have to tell me about whether that's true. I don't know if there's also a height requirement, but now it sounds like there's this additional requirement of don't have frequent loose stools.
Well, I think that's probably in any job where that wouldn't be ideal. As far as the eyesight goes, it used to be like, even well before, my time in the military, you used to have to be 20/20 vision. If you weren't, boom, that was it, you're done. Now you have to be correctable to 20/20. I just happened to have 20/20 at that time. Although as I age here, low light and small letters up close is definitely becoming more of a challenge. I get a pair of cheaters kicking around somewhere that I got to throw on every once in a while.
So staying hydrated, you've mentioned, is something is important. And, all the ways that we take care of ourselves. I'm also picturing you on this treadmill, getting, your oxygen on the treadmill. And I mean, you said you had to stay limber. How did you stay limber?
Not really with yoga, although my wife was big into it for a while. She still is. No, it was, for me, it was just exercise. It was weight training and, cardio, running, stuff like that. Just basic exercise that, we should all be doing some sort of, but nothing specific that I would think of to tailor it to flying, just to be in decent shape, you know what I mean, to try to head off some of any ailments that could get you where you're in that type of environment. So just good nutrition, hydration, and good exercise. I mean, we all have our vices for sure, and I do too. But for the most part, just leading a relative healthy lifestyle to help you out through there. It makes it a lot easier.
Okay, I have to ask you this because it's sort of like a joke question. But there are people out there who believe the earth is flat, and you've actually been like higher up in the air than anybody I personally know. So I don't know anybody who's been out. I don't know any astronauts personally, but you've been the highest of everybody I personally know. And, we get these like photographs of what things look like from space. So from your vantage point up there, the highest you've been or whatever, what do you see when you're up there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I can tell you that the Earth's not flat, right? No, at that altitude, you're above 90% of the atmosphere. So the sky above you, even if it's broad daylight, is darker. Some of the pictures I have, just, that I snapped on my phone or whatever, are a little bit more dramatic than maybe it really looks. But the sky is a dark, dark blue, and you absolutely see the curvature of the Earth from that altitude. It's unquestionable. Just I can text you a picture of what I have later. It's quite a beautiful view, really is. It's kind of amazing how insignificant you feel up there because it's just so large and it's just so vast. It's really, I couldn't complain about the office view. It was a great view. And even now, just as an airline pilot, it's, kind of the same thing. There are days you're out there flying, you're just like, wow, this is just amazingly beautiful.
I'm so glad that you're talking about that because, I wonder, because you are moving and, I think, well, for me, it's easier to reflect and sort of appreciate things when I can sit and be still. And like somehow it's harder for me when I'm like in motion. And I was just, yeah, I love, do you remember the first time that you really had that experience of awe looking back down at the earth?
The first time. Maybe not. I think maybe my first, what they call high flight in the U-2, what you do in the two-seater, you have another person with you. When I got up to that altitude, you're just cruising along. It's really quiet up there. There's not a lot of, turbulence. You just hear the whish of the, the wind going by you, a little bit of the moan of the engine and just like looking because you're doing 7 miles a minute or whatever, but it doesn't feel like that. It almost feels like you're sitting still. And yeah, but that was something that never really went away when I was doing that job. I could be, over Afghanistan or wherever. And it's like, which is actually a beautiful place from up high, with all the mountains and, that feeling never really went away, that awe of just looking around and just thinking about what's really out there, just how vast Earth really can be.
Did you ever have this experience of looking down from above and seeing a place and ever go, okay, I want to go visit that place? And have you done that?
I'm on the road 17 days a month, going to all different places. I think I've seen, no, I mean, one place I still haven't been is the Grand Canyon. When I'm heading out, your way from New York or whatever, we fly over it quite a bit. And that would be one place I still want to see that a lot of people have and I still haven't. But yeah, I think that was it. I haven't actually just, picked a spot on the ground and be like, ooh, I'm going to go check that out. Haven't really done that.
And you spent a lot of time in the pandemic. You took some time because, obviously the airline industry got super affected. You had some time where you were actually home for a while, right?
I did. The airline offered us leaves of absence, which was at a portion of our pay that we were getting. But, like you said, the travel demand went from, there was almost 2 million people a day going through, TSA going through security through all the airports in the country to virtually zero, when the pandemic hit. So yes, I had the opportunity to put in for 6 months. I got that. And then I took an additional month, and it was great. I get to be home, be a stay at home dad for a while. My wife, and she was virtual too, but, I could get the kids up, get them off to school. I could make their breakfast. It was really a great opportunity to do that. Because that is one downfall of the job is I'm gone a lot. When I'm home, which is great. I don't take work home with me, but when I'm gone, I'm gone. So that was a good opportunity to take and do the dad thing for 7 months straight.
Okay, so Gary, this idea of what you're going through when you're in the air, what your body's going through, this idea of pulling G's or, this idea of G-force, like how do people experience that differently when they're in the air?
Okay, well, yeah, that's a good question. In the airline world, you're really not getting much over like 1.3. The airplanes aren't really designed for that, and you shouldn't be. In the more tactical military environment, depending on what you're flying, anytime if you take a sharp turn or like a sharp bank angle and pull to really have a small turn radius, you're going to induce G-forces. Now, what that is, it's just basically gravity. So if you turn and you pull 2 Gs, you're doubling what your weight is essentially. So a 2G, me, whatever, I'll say I'm 180 pounds, might be a little bit more than that now, but so if I'm 2Gs and that's very benign, then that's essentially like weighing 360 pounds. And everybody handles that a little bit differently. So, people with more, I think, larger legs more, because the thing is when you pull G's, all the blood goes from your brain down into your extremities. And the way you combat that is basically by tightening up and trying to do what you can to keep that blood up high in the heart and in the brain and stuff like that. Because if you don't, what happens is you ultimately pass out. And everybody's tolerance is a little bit different. Like for me, I would start about 5 Gs. I haven't really pulled much more than that. I think the most I pulled is around 7, and that was just in a 238, right around the 7 mark. And that's a lot. For me, anything over 5 really starts to get uncomfortable. Even when I'm doing what's called an anti-G strain maneuver, it's basically a series of certain types of breathing and, tightening your legs, your butt, stuff like that, just trying to keep all that blood up high. But I'll start getting a little bit of tunnel vision, and it's exactly what it sounds. The world just kind of almost starts looking like you're going through a soda straw. So that's definitely one of the challenges, especially in tactical type aircraft where, you can essentially pass out. People do all the time. You can go on YouTube and look at people training in something that's called a centrifuge, and they just, put them in this thing and they spin them around, and you'll see them pass out after so many G's. And then, you wake up, you kind of don't really know where you are for a second, and then you pick it up. Fortunately, I've never experienced that, but you can see how people do for sure.
Why does the tunnel vision happen?
Well, I'm obviously not a medical professional or anything, but the way I understand it, as the blood leaves your brain, it's just the first thing to go. It's what, I don't know if eyesight requires the most amount of, that type of blood and oxygen function, but once the blood kind of starts to drain out of the brain, your vision's really the first thing to go.
Wow. And I'm just thinking back to like being at a theme park or a amusement park where there are roller coasters and stuff like that, and just the forces of gravity and going in different directions. And like, I remember having a friend that would puke. Just like that, people are going to experience that a greater degree, I guess, in what you've been experiencing.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's a good way to compare it. Is a roller coaster, like the ones that go upside down, and you feel yourself sticking to the seat. That's what it is. A lot of times, the spinning around and stuff like that, the rolling, that in airplanes, that'll get people sick. I can't tell you, when I was instructing, how many people first get there, and they have these tough, strong 23-year-old Marines, and they're ready to go, and you get them up there, they're throwing up in a bag 5 minutes into the flight. And that's something they actually work with training aviators. And unfortunately, some people just don't get by it, but they do everything they can to work with medication, with, special diet things. And they'll actually put you in what they would affectionately refer to as a spin and puke, where they send you down a Pensacola. I believe that's where it was. And it's just basically a chair, and they just spin you around. And to me, I think I would quit, because there's nothing worse than being motion sick. I never really had a problem with it. I almost got sick on 2 flights in the military. It was just new experiences for me, both in, the new airplanes. Like when I went back to instruct, I hadn't been upside down on an airplane in 3 or 4 years. So going back to that, I was like, I definitely took a long nap, and I was a little queasy after that day. But yeah, for sure, it's a very real thing. Motion sickness. I mean, people even get sick on airliners now, which that doesn't happen too much unless, it's a pretty rough, turbulent day, which, can happen in this world. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge for sure.
I get so excited. I get this kind of goosebump feeling when I get a booking from a new client that I haven't met yet. And I get so excited because I know that somebody has made a decision to go really, really, really deep into their healing. Because I know that Ayurveda is not a quote unquote normal thing that many people have access to, at least not in the United States where I live. So I know that when someone books with me, that they've really made a decision that they want to go deep into their healing. And so you could do that on my website at heathergrish.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. You can book me for either a Ayurvedic consultation if you're ready to dive in, or you can also book me for a 15-minute connection call if you're not sure where to go yet. I do have a couple offerings that are not on my website, and we could talk about that. So I look forward to meeting you. Well, since you mentioned turbulence, I just wanted to say something funny. I remember the first time I felt turbulence on a plane at age 15, and going, this is fun. Oh my God. And laughing with my friends on the plane. I was going to play softball at a national tournament in Oklahoma, and I'm sitting there with one of my teammates and feeling this turbulence. But I will say that I've gone from there to the experience of now when I feel turbulence on a plane, I'm gripping the seat and I'm afraid. So my experience of turbulence has really changed throughout the years.
Yeah, I can totally understand and appreciate that. We're pretty darn good at kind of forecasting where turbulence is and where it's going to be. I mean, the air is such a dynamic environment. I mean, if you think about it, as safe as air travel is, which it is insanely safe. I mean, at the end of the day, you are in a metal tube, going just about the speed of sound through the air with, 180 or 200 people. But, there's different weather patterns and stuff like that, which can affect that. But we really know where the really bad stuff is, and we stay out of it. Those airplanes are designed to take so much more than you've usually experienced as far as turbulence go. It's not fun. None of us like to be in it. We're always looking for a smoother ride or looking to avoid those areas of turbulence. Now, the way the technology is, I carry an iPad with me. We all do. And, we have programs on there that show us exactly where the turbulence is. And sometimes it's just everywhere. There are those days where you just can't get out of it. You just go to where it's to try to make everybody as comfortable as possible. We're going to where it's the best. But some days you can't win.
I'm kind of curious, what are the factors that can predict turbulence? What is it created by?
In the higher altitudes, it could just different air masses. Obviously, large frontal movements and stuff like that, where there's unstable air and thunderstorms and stuff like that. We obviously avoid thunderstorms because those can be pretty darn dangerous. And we're very good at, with onboard weather radar and weather briefs. And that's part of the job too, that maybe a lot of people don't know, is we're fairly good at, understanding weather. I mean, it's part of it. You have to. It's one of the biggest impacts on airplanes. But down low, it can be caused by, a lot of times, I think everybody's felt that you're coming into land and you feel like you're getting bumped around again. Hot summer days, there's different type of land characteristics. Like if you're flying over maybe a dark farmland to somewhere where there's buildings or where there's pavement, that creates some thermal energy that comes up, off the earth, and it definitely impacts your flight path a little bit. So it can be all different things, but a lot of the times we know it's weather related, with convective weather, meaning thunderstorms, stuff like that. But sometimes there is just that clear turbulence where it's just unstable air, and it's just, if you're flying near the jet stream, sometimes that can be a little bit turbulent, in certain, especially over the winter time, when the jet stream's really strong, you're talking about 160, 180 knots of wind. But we use that a lot of, coming from the west to the east, at least in the U.S., it's really cut your flights with a heck of a tailwind.
That's super cool. Thank you. I heard this term a couple of months ago. I don't know if you've heard this term, revenge travel.
Yeah, I've heard, yeah, kind of. I think a lot of people were really tired of being locked down. There was a time where airline tickets were really cheap, but I think a lot of people were just like, all right, the vaccine's out or whatever, like we're going. A lot of people canceled their vacations that they plan a year out. Traveling's not cheap either, and a lot of people, I know this obviously pandemic hurt a lot of people. I'm well aware of that, but some people did okay and they had the money to spend to go travel. So there are a lot of people traveling right now for sure.
I think a lot of families, all the families that were, well, not just the families, but I'm just thinking of all the families that were having to homeschool and all the pressure and heat and tension that was building in everybody's homes from having all that happen. Yeah, it's crazy. I know you and I have known each other for a long time and we've never been through anything like this. And it's a strange time. And
Yeah, totally straight, really unprecedented. I mean, none of us have really been through anything like this before. So it's interesting to see how we're coming out of it and gotta think positive. Hopefully it'll end good. And it seems to be trending that way for sure, especially in the travel industry. Well, I think business travel is going to be a little bit slow to come back, like large conventions and stuff like that, which is really where we do get a lot of our business. But right now it seems to just be a lot of leisure travel.
so when people start to travel again, and maybe people are afraid to travel, maybe they're afraid of getting in contact with different variants of the coronavirus. What would you give someone who's wants to start traveling again, who hasn't been traveling for a while, but they really are itching to go somewhere? What kind of advice would you give them?
Right now, everybody still wear masks on airplanes and airports and stuff like that. They are cleaning the airplanes, quite a bit more than they have in the past. And one of the things to think about is like, yes, you are packed in there pretty good. If you think about, there was a study done, and I wish I could, the government did it along with the military, and I think they used a 777, but it was just basically the circulation of air in an airplane. A lot of people are under the impression it's like just gross recycled air for the entire time. And when you think about it, airplane is pressurized. And the way it pressurized is air comes in through either the bleed system or, outside of the aircraft and comes in, and it also goes out the back. In order for aircraft to maintain pressure, less air has to go out back than it's coming in. So the air is constantly being recycled. And that's something that people could research of how much faster the air is getting recycled than in, say, like an operating room or something like that. I don't want to give you exact numbers because, one, I don't know them. I don't want to be wrong. But the air on an airplane is actually quite clean. That's getting cycled through a ton. And really, there's almost no, that I'm aware of, confirmed cases of, COVID or somebody getting sick from being, from an airplane. None that I know of. And that's kind of been talked about quite a bit. Not as much lately, but, before, when the travel was starting to gear up again, people definitely had that concern, which I understand. But there's really no evidence saying that being on an airplane is any less safe than being anywhere else.
What do you think the listeners need to know that I might have missed about the body or the mind experience related to flying, whether it's flying these really special planes that you've flown while you were in the military or commercial flights?
I think a lot of it's really just balance with anything else, just taking care of yourself, taking care of your body. One of that, like anybody who's traveled knows, one of the challenges being on the road is diet, right? Because we all usually, eat what we eat at home. A lot of us cook for ourselves or, we know what we want, but that can be a challenge when you're on the road and you're in a hurry. For me, for example, I eat breakfast every morning. That's like my biggest thing. I love breakfast, get my coffee, make my omelet, whatever it is. But being on the road, that can be tough because if I have a 5 a.m. sign in and I'm leaving a hotel, well, nothing's open yet. I do take food with me, like oatmeal and stuff, but, that can be a little cumbersome too. But it's just kind of preparing in that way. But I think the whole, just experience with flying and almost anything in general, but, especially flying, it's just balance of, taking care of your body, trying to adapt to a sleep schedule that you may not be everybody else's norm. That would be it. I hope that kind of answers your question there.
Yeah, I think so. And you also mentioned that hydration piece earlier, which is huge. Why is hydration so important when you're flying, actually?
Well, it's important no matter what. But when I was flying the U-2, it was a great risk reducer for decompression sickness. They say that was just a good way to do it. Also, when you're on an airliner, the air is much, much drier than we're used to. Again, I don't have the percentage of humidity that's in the air, but it's much drier. So you always want to be drinking water for that. you'll feel a lot better too. I mean, more people are dehydrated than they think. And if, they're not drinking water, then you get on a long airplane for a long flight, and even an airline, your body's sitting at about 7,000 or 8,000 feet, even though it's pressurized. You're still up at altitude because you can't pressurize to sea level. Just airplanes just don't do that. So you're still at about 7,000 or 8,000 foot, and that that's not a place where a lot of people's bodies are, or that they're used to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And that's really interesting. I mean, I'm happy that you mentioned that the air is dry. And one of the things that we recommend in Ayurveda people do before they go on a plane is to oil the inside of their nose with like a sesame oil or coconut oil or something like that, just on the inner lining of the nostrils so that those mucous membranes don't dry out. I don't know if any of your colleagues ever used any tricks like that.
Not that I'm aware of. I hadn't heard that, but yeah, I mean, like you said, it would do the job of, keeping that, because you do dry out. And again, taking you back to, when I flew the U2, even, you were breathing 100% oxygen the whole time, which could be very dry. I'd get something, they call it dragon eyes, where, you'd be done after a long mission. Your eyes are just, they're almost hurt because they just, even though you're drinking water, they just dry out and they burn, they get really bloodshot. But, only lasts, once you're back in the normal air and you drink a little bit more water, you're good to go there. But yeah, that's I don't know of any colleagues that do something like that, but I can definitely see that it's a good idea.
Okay, pass that tip along.
Will do. Heck, I'll try it myself. We'll see what happens.
You know what the other tip is that we tell people? We tell people to not drink icy beverages on the plane too. I don't know if that is ever a thing that came up.
No, I don't know. Why is that?
So we're big in Ayurveda on people not having ice. And it's funny because I've always tried to figure out like how much of this is sort of wives' tale and how much of this is actually like legit, and can it be scientifically proven? And so we say that the ice disrupts the digestive fire, right, in the stomach and in the digestive tract. And so the key, because it's so important to make sure you digest well, especially while you're traveling, so that because your digestion is so correlated with your immune system, so that you don't essentially jack up your digestion while you're traveling, so that you could be strong in case you did come up, your immune system came up against something that it needed a little bit more horsepower to get rid of. So that's one thing. And it's interesting because I actually found a study in this book that has the same name as my podcast, this book called Wisdom of the Body that was written in like 1932. I found it when I was looking up, is there another, book? Because I was thinking about maybe having that as a name of one of my future books. And I found that it already was a name of a book. And I read the book, and there was a study done on dogs in like 1932. And they studied what would happen when they would put ice in the stomach of the dog, and essentially activated the adrenal system in this study. And I've not seen any modern studies on what that does. But so I think it's just this idea of disrupting the balance of the body and possibly even, the adrenal access in the body.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Wow, I was unaware of that. I know for me personally, I don't normally have ice on an airplane anyway. I always just have my bottles of water or black coffee, but I was unaware of that.
Yeah. So, but it's funny. I mean, in the US, ice is such a big thing that we do as like a norm. So yeah, just say no ice. Thanks.
Right.
People, when they go to Mexico, they say no ice, but that's for a different reason.
Well, did you have that, experience when you went to India a few years ago? I mean, you must have had to take a lot of precautions for that, or.
Well, yeah, I mean, when I was in India, I did get sick. And I think most people that go to India get sick. I got sick one day. So it was about halfway, maybe 3/4 or 2/3 of the way through the trip, because I was on this tour, but I don't know exactly where it came from. I feel like it was a pathogen that came from one of two places. I swam in this dam, like in this reservoir that I should not have been in, probably, which was right near the ashram. There's a whole bunch of us that went swimming one day, and I probably shouldn't have done that. So that's one potential point of entry. The others was we went to trusted restaurants. I was with a group that was pretty great about finding places that we could eat at and safely. But I did notice one day on my banana leaf, as I looked down, that there were droplets of water on my banana leaf, which I hadn't seen earlier. And then the next day I was barfing and all that. So.
Oh, brutal. No, I think that, when, again, people traveling too, I think that's We kind of talked about it before, but yeah, diet is just trying to find something, try to eat something that you normally eat because it is so easy. Even if you're traveling after a long day of traveling, just to go and, get some drink and get some heavy food, but, just having a little bit of discipline as far as, maybe getting some exercise first. And, yeah, the burger looks really good. And don't get me wrong, I got my vice. I love certain heavy foods at times, but, falling into a trap where you're constantly eating on the road and making bad choices. It's definitely one of the challenges that comes along with this job or any type of job where you're traveling.
So speaking of good choices or just sort of like doing the right thing for your body, Gary, what would the phrase wisdom of the body mean to you?
That's a great question. I think, wisdom, just what you've been given and like how amazing the body really is and how amazing it is at, telling us its current state and telling us what it needs. I think it's definitely something that people really need to pay attention to and listen to.
Oh, that's very well said, Gary. Thank you so much for being here and for coming on The Wisdom of the Body. And I've really enjoyed our chat today.
I really enjoyed being here. Thanks so much for having me. Best of luck.
Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrish.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.